What is spontaneity? What do you think spontaneity is? Do you think your work is spontaneous? Do you think your brain operates in a spontaneous way? How do you identify what is spontaneous from what is not spontaneous? And how do you really look at a piece of work and say, yes, that's spontaneous? These are questions I've been asking myself for years, and in writing the book, I hope I've come to some kind of a settled position about that. To do this, I've looked at my own motivations, the antecedents, the predetermined kinds of behaviours that I do, the learned behaviours, my concepts, my style, all sorts of factors, many of which operate out of awareness, I would say. They appear to be automatic. And of course, spontaneous things are, by their very nature, out of awareness. They just happen. They're impulses that are just generated. I looked into neuroscience to see what they had to say about spontaneity, and it appears that the brain does produce spontaneous thoughts, certainly within cognitive states, so various states of awareness, and some things like daydreaming and random thinking can be attributed to spontaneous thoughts. And by spontaneous, it means thoughts that haven't been affected by your own behaviour or by an external kind of force or influence. They are thoughts that have just arisen apparently from nowhere. So spontaneity does exist within the mind, but of course how it translates into work is more difficult to say. I think the image of a painter like Jackson Pollock, for instance, throwing stuff around and going through great physical choreography, and looking very much as if the work is spontaneous and produced in some kind of a freely abandoned frenzy, can be misleading, because what you don't see is the rehearsal and the thought, the aesthetic positioning, and all sorts of ingredients that go into that kind of action. And I'm not saying that it's not spontaneous. What I'm saying is it may not be quite as spontaneous as you think it is when you look at it, and it may need more unpicking than that. And coming back to my own work as a composer and as a painter, it's very hard for me to differentiate between what is spontaneous and what is an imminent instantiation of my actions. In other words, when I'm working and I'm physically engaged with what I'm doing with the materials, and I'm working at a rapid speed, I'm not really thinking very much. It's more like sort of stimulus response. Things are moving along very, very quickly. It's easy for me to think that everything that I'm doing is spontaneous, because a lot of it is out of awareness, because I'm not thinking about it consciously. At least I don't think I'm thinking about it consciously. But on the other hand, there are quite likely to be all sorts of predetermined conditionings that are out of my awareness, all sorts of subconscious things that are guiding and influencing my actions that I think could be spontaneous. So I don't know how to unpick any of this. I have to assume that my actions when I'm painting and when I'm composing are a mixture of imminent instantiation, this stuff that arises in the moment because of the stimulus that my brain is receiving, and possibly spontaneous thoughts that are arising out of nowhere that are going into that mix. I like the notion of spontaneity because I connect it with freshness, with a sense of ease of working, of discovery. But just how spontaneous my work is, or indeed how spontaneous anybody else's work is, it's very, very hard to say. And sometimes people think that chance and spontaneity are connected. For instance, taking a painting analogy, I get a tin of paint, I tie it up to some kind of axis, I make a hole in it, I let the paint dribble through, and I set the paint in motion across the surface, and it goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. The paint dribbles and splashes all over the place. Chance, spontaneity, oh yes, but if you analyse those things, the role that physics plays in velocity, trajectory, the amount of force you put into something, the direction it goes in, the viscosity of the paint, the surface it splashes onto. A lot of these things are actually calculatable or calculable if you had the mind to do it. So although it appears like chance, in actual fact the things you set in motion are not really producing events that are quite as chance filled as you may think, because physics has already determined how many of those factors will pan out. So again, it leaves you in this position of, if I'm doing this or I'm doing that, how spontaneous is it? You don't have to know to be a good artist. You don't have to know to be a good composer. It actually doesn't make any difference, because as artists we do what we do and we do it how we do it. But I'm just a very curious person, and I like to know what elements of my painting are actually spontaneous. My conclusion is, I don't know, and I'm unlikely to know. But the investigations that I've gone through to try and pin down exactly what spontaneity is have helped to inform my appreciation of what spontaneity may be and how it may occur in my work. So again, voyage of discovery, speculative stuff, well, it's hard to be objective, of course, but I feel better informed about how to go forward with that information, and I also feel very excited about going forward with that information. Anyway, a little bit more from me in the writing of Music, Painting, Landscape and Me. Take care and goodbye for now.